Yes, sir. All right, so this is our presentation about the CIA and KGB in the Cold War. I'm Kirill Pochstar.
I'm Ethan Baker.
All right, that's Ethan Baker.
Okay, overview of the CIA. Could you guess what CIA stands for? I bet you can't. It's the Central Intelligence Agency, and that's the flag. You know, it's got the eagle because America. And America's pretty awesome. It's not, but yeah, you got the Central Intelligence Agency there, of the United States of America, because it's in the U.S., not anywhere else. Every other country has their own, and yeah. This Kirio's just gonna go to the bathroom really quick.
No, I'm not. Yo, can we keep it pushing this?
Okay,
We have to keep this professional, okay?
Okay, so it's founded in 1947, and it's founded during the Cold War, so it's like after World War II, and you know, during the Cold War when the U.S. and the USSR are so friendly towards each other, and it was made to gather and act on intelligence to protect national security. So like gather, you're spying on people, or like spying on the USSR, like gather information on bomb sites and like military operations and all that kind of stuff, and analyze. They're taking that information, seeing what they can do with it, and seeing how they can work with that, and how they can kaboom bam and
Lock it, dude.
and shoot people up if they deserve it. Yeah, that's act on intelligence and protect national security, of course. So if there's a threat, they go on covert missions and boom bam. And just
He's pretty funny, isn't he?
you ruined it.
Yeah, you're right.
And protect national security, and yeah, protect the U.S. baby. What sounds the Eagles make? Yeah, based in the U.S. of A. Donald Trump. My fault. But yeah, based in the USA, and a lot of other countries have their own versions, like the Soviets, the commies.
Which I'll talk about, of course.
Yeah, started by Harry Truman, and pretty interesting guy. His name's Harry, and last name's Truman. It was created to by the increased threat of Soviets and communism. So they're like, I don't want communism spreading. So they were like, yeah, we're gonna try and stop that and stop the USSR and secretly spy on everyone.
Yeah, just to kind of like get information on
This isn't
them.
your slide, buddy.
Anyways, I think part of it, right, is to like get information, maybe where they're trying to spread communism to, kind of get a grasp on that, just to kind of plan forward. But yeah, all right.
Mr. Russian.
All right. So overview of the KGB. KGB stands for Комитет государственной безопасности. The American version is Комитет государственной безопасности. All right. So I know the symbol isn't there right now, but I believe it has a hammer and a sickle, which of course represents the USSR or the Soviet Union at the time. Kind of on brand there.
What was that? Not even fun.
Anyways, sorry about that. We had to cut it there. Just for a moment, we got a little bit off track. But anyways,
Oh yeah, I just like it.
anyways, as you can see, KGB was established on March 13th, 1954. It essentially had the same mission as the CIA, to protect national security and gather information on enemies. And if you couldn't tell, that enemy was the CIA, or like the US in general. It was based in the USSR, of course. I think I kind of alluded to that earlier. It was founded by Clement Voroshilov. As you can see, this is a picture of him. It's actually kind of cool picture. I like it. Yeah, it's a good reenactment of that. And it was essentially created as the sword and shield of the USSR, and it was to maintain internal and external security. So that means not only were they working outside of the USSR, like, you know, against America, all that kind of stuff, but also inside to, you know, remove CIA spies or just traitors in general. Yeah, that's all overall for the overview. So, the involvement of the KGB during the Cold War. Good?
Yeah, I'm just checking the time.
Gotcha. Alright, so the involvement of the KGB during the Cold War. The KGB essentially spied on NATO and the US, gathering intelligence about military strategies, nuclear weapons, which was, like, of course, a really big thing and played a really big role during the Cold War, and more. KGB was involved with counterintelligence in the USSR, essentially finding out who the CIA spies in the Soviet Union are and cracking down on them. They also spread false information through false information campaigns to mislead the CIA. There are a couple examples of that. I believe one of them was the AIDS campaign, and essentially they framed the CIA for like spreading the AIDS disease to African people, and it was like this entire messed up thing, and they just framed the CIA, kind of blamed it on them when the KGB did it. In reality, just to kind of ruin the CIA's reputation. Yeah. Not only did they gather information, but also did attacks within to ultimately destabilize Western countries. Yeah. So, like, you know, getting in there, it's like just like working from the inside out to destabilize them, which is, like, of course, like as I was talking about before, the entire AIDS thing. And they also, of course, spread communism and, like, communist propaganda to influence public opinions. So a couple of the KGB tactics, they implemented informants along with deep cover spies. So those were essentially just like who they set out, just informants, and then also deep cover spies, which were just like, I guess they were there for longer periods of time. They were further into like their identities, I guess, really going on with that. Anyways, there were also sexual entrapments to blackmail politicians, diplomats, and military officers. I'm assuming that's just like regular blackmail, right? There were false flag ops, which were just KGB spies pretending to be a part of other countries, and they were used to cause confusion. They forged documents and spread false news. They forged documents and spread false news, such as framing the CIA for creating aids to harm African Americans. I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but yeah, they just kind of framed the CIA there. Yeah, they had many different variations of propaganda. As you can see here, this one is definitely based during the Cold War because you can see the Russian astronaut. And of course, they also used double agents. Wait, please. Anyways, so further on KGB tactics. They assassinated traitors such as Georgy Markov. As you can see, there's this very pleasing photo of him, and he was essentially killed with a poison-tipped umbrella.
Oh, we gotta reenact that. Reenact it.
We're not reenacting that. I'm sorry. I have to restart now.
Oh, sorry.
You're all good. So, further on KGB tactics, as you can see, they assassinated traitors such as Georgy Markov, and you can see there's this very pleasing photo of him here, and he was actually killed with a poison-tipped umbrella, which is actually seen to be used like multiple times by the CIA and by the KGB, I believe. Yeah, not much to it, it's just an umbrella, and its tip was poison, and I guess he just got stabbed with it and he died. There was also sabotage of Western technology developments and key infrastructure. So, just overall, just like slowing them down, sabotaging them, and yeah. So, KGB technology now. So they bugged hotel rooms, telephones, etc. So, you know, like all the spy stuff. I guess if they had like intelligence on where a CIA spy would be, like, staying at in a hotel, they would bug it, and then the CIA spy, like, they would bug the hotel room or the telephone, and the CIA spy could, like, talk and they could essentially get all the information that they're talking about, which could provide them with a very great advantage overall. There were cameras that were hidden in everyday objects like pens and belt buckles. Same thing, just for gathering information. Maybe also recording audio when like maybe they were meeting with somebody. They tapped phone calls and especially foreign visitors to monitor what they were saying. So they were essentially like under the assumption that these foreign visitors were possibly CIA spies, and just like very cautious in general, I would say. They had used miniature guns disguised as cigarette cases, and you can see here, it's like a bunch of like chopped up the cigarette butts, I guess. Well, those aren't even the butts; those are just like just chopped up cigarettes, and there would be the miniature gun inside. So I guess pretty good for assassinating somebody. I don't think anybody would really suspect that. I think that's actually a very cool idea. They used a lot of overall cryptography. They had fake passports and identities, also just allowing them to get into like other countries and stuff. And vehicles had hidden compartments to smuggle in various things, including weapons and people. So just smuggling things like over the border, maybe in the U.S. as well. So famous KGB spies.
What's this guy's name?
Aldo James.
Oh.
Okay, so famous KGB spies. Aldrich Ames, who was once a CIA agent, essentially turned to the KGB and sold them information about the CIA. I believe he was being offered to pay more money, so he just kind of did it. And he was actually a very good spy. He got away with it for a while, but I believe he was ultimately arrested. Kim Philby was a double agent for the KGB during the Cold War. He was a part of the Cambridge Five, which was an organization of KGB spies who infiltrated Britain and passed on information to the Soviet Union. Another cool guy. There was also Rudolf Abel, and he was another double agent for the KGB, who operated in the U.S. under the name of William Fisher. Alias. Was it alias? That's my fault. Alias, under the alias of William Fisher. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to my good friend Ethan here. He's gonna talk about some of the CIA stuff.
Okay, so I almost fell. How were the CIA involved in the Cold War? So the CIA played a secretive role in the Cold War in a fight to stop the spread of communism and counter the influence of the USSR. So basically, they didn't like them, wanted them out, and they did not like communism at all, and they just wanted to like counter like all the influence they have on like the other countries that the USSR do. So they gathered information on Soviet military and political moves and nuclear weapons and spies. So they just gathered everything in military-wise that could harm them in general, and they just like gathered information, analyzed it, see what they could do about it. They used code breaking, double agents, and satellites to gather information. And I think the code breaking and double agents are pretty cool because like imagine just being like able to hear something just like, yep, that's what that means, and we're gonna go kill him now. And double agents are also cool, like James Bond, Curio's a dumb, but anyway, a key example of this is when the CIA U-2 spy plane captured images of Soviet missile sites in Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that was like really cool and really good that they did that. Otherwise, a lot of bad stuff probably would have happened. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Okay, so the CIA, the Cold War continued. Because I didn't have enough room on the other slides, but the CIA carried out CIA in the Cold War continued because I didn't have enough slides for the slide of the slide.
Thanks to
Action! CIA in the Cold War continued because I didn't have enough slides. Frick! I did it again! CIA in the Cold War continued. So basically, the CIA carried out secretive missions to influence and overthrow foreign governments that were. I said that in the other slide. I don't know why I put that again, but anyway, like I said, they just want to counter the influence of communism. An example of this is Iran in 1953, Guatemala.
Iran. There you go, bud.
Guatemala in 1954, and Chile in 1973. The CIA also funded anti-communist groups and gave them training. So like anything that were trying to overthrow the communist government, they were like, yeah, here's some money, go kill the communists. They used propaganda and ran radio stations in Eastern Europe and in the USSR to weaken communist support. Yeah, like I said, they just were like, here's money, go kill the damn communists. They also worked to stop KGB spies from stealing U.S. intelligence, like, you know, double agents and stuff, and they worked to counteract. It's literally, they're just counteracting each other in a way. And the CIA also tried to recruit KGB agents to be double agents and betray their own country. And, yeah, that guy, I don't know who that guy is.
Stop. Stop.
Why?
Communist groups gave them training.
Okay, CIA tactics in the Cold War. Human intelligence. So they used human spies in the USSR to gather information. Double agents, spies. You know, people that walked into the USSR were like, "Yep, spy," and we're gonna gather all the information. And they used signal intelligence and used intercepting radio frequencies and telephone calls to gather information. So like, you know, code breaking, stuff like that, and especially if they were like, I don't know, using codes and stuff and code breaking them. Yeah, like I said before, they used satellites to gather information, took pictures of like, you know, the countries from above and spaces. And like I said again, they backed anti-communist parties that were trying to like overthrow the government or take control, giving them money and power and things like that. CIA taxes continued because I didn't have enough room on the other side. They used radio stations to promote pro-American and anti-communist propaganda in Europe. They used sabotage techniques to disrupt Soviet military. They secretly supported underground resistance groups within Soviet bloc countries. Like I said, they wanted to overthrow. They were like, money and guns. Go get them, pal.
Just like the U.S. is, eh?
I don't know why you decided to comment like real. Oh, it's like moves! They also secretly copied Soviet technology to keep pace and surpass USSR technology. So they basically just like, it's the arms race. They were like trying to keep up because they thought they were a threat and they thought they were like nuclear war and all that stuff. And get a load of this guy. But yeah. I guess alright. Okay, CIA technologies in the Cold War. So they used spy satellites like Corona, took pictures of enemy bases and military operations from the sky. An example of this is that, like I said before, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Very lucky they did that, otherwise you might have been all never born and all blown up. Follow. They used high-tech spy planes like the U-2 and the A-12 Oxcart. That is a cool name. And they use them to spy on Soviets from the air. From the air, so they just use them, you know, in the air, and that's what they did there. They used bugs like in the movies, and they were like planted stuff on like people's collars and the wall and the watches and pens and stuff, and just listening to the conversation they were having with other military people from different countries. They used unmanned submarines disguised as sea life, which is also very cool. That gathered information from some Soviet harbors. And another cool thing, they used cameras and put them in like their cigarette lighters and their collars and stuff, and they like took pictures. Awesome. Technology continued. They used spy balloons to take aerial photos of Soviet land, but had mixed success because like they could just get shot down. Oh, that reminds me of the spy plane that China sent to America or something. Remember that?
Oh, no, didn't they, it was like a hot air balloon, right?
Yeah, then they shot it. Anyway.
No, it was Japan, right? They had the hot air balloons.
I don't know.
Yeah, I believe it was Japan. They tried to use like hot air balloons and like put bombs on them.
We're not talking about that.
Oh, okay, never mind. Anyways, yeah, keep going. That's my fault.
They had poison-tipped umbrellas like the KGB, like he was talking about. I still want to reenact them. But they used pens and cigars on attempt to assassinate. Oh, poison-tipped pens and cigars. Okay, let's finish like that.
Run it back, Mr. Randall.
ChatGPT. I didn't even like read over this stuff. Anyway, they used spy balloons to take aerial photos of Soviet land, but had mixed success.
Dude, started from technology.
Technology continued.
Because he didn't have enough room in the last slide.
Thanks for the input, Kirill.
You're very welcome, Ethan, actually.
They used spy balloons to take aerial photos of Soviet land, but had mixed success. Because you know they get shot down and stuff, and it's like enters its airspace, and you're just like, oh, that's probably something not good. They had poison tip umbrellas, pens, and cigars in an attempt to assassinate other agents high up in the military, and yeah. They also had disguises that they made, like voice alteration, realistic masks, and wigs. That's freaking awesome. I know I could say that a lot. Like, imagine like coming in with like a whole different face. And, like, I'm a Soviet, brother. Oh God, Khabib Nurmagomedov. They just had fake IDs and fake documents, which is really boring. Like I can do that. Whoa. Famous agents and higher ups of the CIA. That guy is. Okay. Famous agents and higher ups in the CIA. Pause. Famous agents and higher ups in the CIA. So Alan Dulles. Famous agents and higher ups in the CIA. Alan Dulles, which is the director of the CIA from 1953 to 1961. He was the longest serving CIA director, and he oversaw major Cold War operations and was a strong anti-communist. Oh, someone's coming. But yeah, so he oversaw a lot of the anti-communist stuff, and he was not a fan of the USSR. James Jesus Angleton, I'm sure it was Jesus, but yeah, he was the head of CIA counterintelligence, worked in counterintelligence for 20 plus years, and he was involved in the double agents of the CIA, which is pretty cool. Then E. Howard Hunt, he was a covert operations officer and helped plan coups in Guatemala and other countries to overthrow communists. Oh. And now we just have a video to finish off our presentation.
Infographics. And never forget another password and keep all your online accounts secure. The CIA and the KGB, two Cold War juggernauts who jockeyed for advantage against each other for decades throughout the Cold War, launching countless campaigns against each other that resulted in proxy wars, assassinations, and even entire cultural revolutions. The rivalry between these two great spy agencies nonetheless very often helped prevent all-out nuclear war. But which agency was truly the greatest spy agency in the world, and which was ultimately more successful than the other during the 45 frigid years of Cold War? During World War II, American President Franklin Roosevelt was concerned about the lack of American intelligence capabilities. American isolationism, which had dictated so much of the USA's foreign policy before and after World War I, had given rise to a wholly insular attitude toward the rest of the world amongst American leadership. Thus, while great powers of Europe frequently made use of covert intelligence agents against each other, and even America, the US found itself with no such capabilities at the start of World War II. The British needed their American allies properly in the fight, and thus dispatched one of their intelligence chiefs to the US in order to teach their rebellious colonists how to undertake the dastardly acts of ungentlemanly warfare. From this initial training program, the Office of Strategic Services was born, and American commandos would undertake many daring missions throughout the war. After the war, the United States realized it could no longer afford to ignore the rest of the world, especially since Europe had developed the nasty habit of kicking off world wars every 20 years or so. To this end, the National Security Act of 1947 established both the National Security Council, which would advise the President on defense and intelligence matters, and the Central Intelligence Agency, a bona fide spy agency tasked with both peacetime and wartime intelligence gathering. While the Americans were dipping their feet into foreign intrigue, the Russians were already old hands in the art of intelligence gathering. The KGB, or the Комитет государственной безопасности, Committee for State Security, was formed in 1954 and formally gathered together Soviet intelligence operatives under one umbrella. Even before it started, though, the men that formed the KGB were seasoned masters of spycraft, themselves descendants of the early communist spies who helped topple the czars and establish the Soviet Union. Thanks to rising income inequality and disillusionment with capitalism throughout Europe, Soviet intelligence agents found many allies throughout the world. And by the time World War II started, they had so many agents operating inside France, Great Britain, and America that Stalin knew about his allies' military developments almost the same time they did. The KGB would itself become one of the most legendary spy agencies of all time and develop a reputation for ruthless efficiency that made its agents feared around the world. Yet, the truth is that KGB agents were masters of their craft and could play any role they needed to masterfully. From deadly assassin to charming confidant, coaxing, manipulating, or forcing their targets to divulge their deepest secrets. Two of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. But which is truly superior? To find out, we'll look at some of each agency's greatest successes. Americans may have been new to the spy game when the CIA was first established, but what they lacked in experience and technique, they more than made up for in sheer guts. In May 1962, CIA agents got wind that the Soviets were abandoning a research facility deep in the Arctic. While the Arctic may be significantly warmer now than it was back then, in 1962 the icy conditions were so bad that shifting ice made the base's sole runway unusable. With supplies dependent on delivery via aircraft, the decision was made to pull the researchers out while a transport aircraft could still land. With the base completely abandoned, the CIA leapt on the opportunity to gather intelligence on Soviet research. The freezing conditions had made the runway unusable once more, though, and with no sign of the weather letting up and fearing that the Soviets may return when it did, the CIA decided that there was only one way to get men into the facility. They would have to parachute in despite freezing cold Arctic winds gusting at high speed. What would be a suicide mission for most turned out to be one of the greatest intelligence coups of the Cold War. Successfully parachuting down to the station in near whiteout conditions, the two CIA men immediately plundered the facility of all useful intelligence, and a few days later their plane pickup arrived. Yet there was no way the big B-17 could land on the frozen runway, which is why the CIA had developed a unique extraction technique pioneered in the Second World War, but never used in the extreme conditions of the far North Arctic. The men on the ground filled 3 balloons with helium and floated them into the sky. The skyhook system, as it came to be known, was nothing more than a hook at the end of a winch, which was itself attached to the interior storage bay of an aircraft. The plane would fly the hook into a line hoisted up by the balloon, and then the entire line would be winched up into the plane. Attached to the first balloon was 150 pounds of secret Soviet equipment and documents. The two agents on the ground, knowing that the skyhook system was extremely dangerous, and thus deciding that it was more important the secret equipment and documents be rescued than them. Despite very low visibility and strong winds, the B-17 managed to snag the first balloon and hoist it up into its cargo well. And 2 passes later, the agents on the ground were themselves winched to safety. Dangling beneath a plane moving at over 150 miles per hour through Arctic weather, the CIA had just proven that any lack of experience and technique on its part was more than made up for in sheer courage and ingenuity. The data recovered showed that the Soviets had been working on techniques to detect American subs under the Arctic ice and to attack them, and it helped keep the U.S. subs hidden from prying Soviet eyes. The United States may have led the way in computer technology, but the KGB was happy to exploit America's use of.
If you're a man, then you've probably heard multiple versions of the following sayings throughout your entire life. Man up, don't cry, and just take the ride. Maybe that's exactly what you've done.
Why is your
Don't
mouth
stress,
sensitive?
bury the sadness.
Its advanced computer networks for its own benefit. In the late 1960s, the U.S. created ARPANET, or Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. This fledgling internet was used by U.S. research labs to share data nationally on secret defense projects. When the space shuttle was announced shortly after the successes of the Apollo program, the Soviets initially believed that the shuttle was secretly a space-based bomber, something which could threaten the entire Soviet Union. Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev immediately tasked the KGB with plundering the secrets of the shuttle and demanded that the Soviet Union's Military-Industrial Commission create their own. As work on the shuttle progressed throughout various labs across the U.S., the cooperating research teams made use of ARPANET to swap data back and forth. Aware of ARPANET's existence, Soviet spies in the U.S. soon infiltrated the computer network and teased out troves of data about the shuttle, learning that it was indeed a peacetime reusable space vehicle and not a secret spaceborne bomber. Not wanting to be outdone by the US once more in the realm of space exploration, Premier Brezhnev ordered Soviet scientists to make full use of the stolen information, resulting in the Buran, a Soviet copy of the space shuttle. In many ways, the Buran is actually superior to the American shuttle, despite using stolen information from which to base their copy and the fact that it only ever flew once. This is because the American shuttle program was beset by outside pressures exerted by various politicians, and shifting priorities constantly changed what the core mission of the shuttle should be. Forced to compromise in order to achieve a wider range of capabilities rather than a specific set of objectives, the shuttle was a fundamentally flawed design. The Soviet Buran, on the other hand, benefited from a single vision that drove its development, and the fact that Soviet lawmakers left its design almost solely in the hands of its chief architect, Valentin Glushko. While the Soviet Union was training and arming North Vietnamese forces during the Vietnam War, it had provided great amounts of aid to the North Koreans and the Chinese during the Korean War a decade before that. The CIA got the chance to take its revenge when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. Even before a single Soviet tank rolled into Afghanistan, though, American agents had already uncovered intelligence that showed the Soviets were about to invade. For 6 full months before the invasion, CIA agents were already busy training Soviet mujahideen and arming them with modern anti-tank and anti-air equipment. Much to the surprise of the Soviet commanders, the moment their troops stepped foot into Afghanistan, they came under fire from advanced precision weapons, such as Stinger missiles, which downed nearly 300 helicopters and 100 airplanes. Grooming contacts in the Pakistani government, CIA operatives ensured that shipments of weapons, medicines, and other vital supplies made their way to Afghan warriors, who put up such a stiff resistance that the Soviet Union was forced to withdraw a decade later. While many factors played a role in the collapse of the Soviet Union and America's triumph in the Cold War, the quagmire of manpower and capital that the CIA had turned Afghanistan into for the Soviets was a key factor in bankrupting the Soviet Union. Even before the KGB's official start, though, the men who would later birth the legendary spy agency had already achieved the greatest intelligence coup of the 20th century. In the years before World War II, modern physics hinted at a bomb with a potential for explosive power that could only be described as apocalyptic. Dubbed the atomic bomb, various nations around the world launched research programs in a frantic race to be the first to develop these doomsday weapons. At the time, many of the world's top physicists lived in Germany, or territories which quickly fell under German influence, and thus they fled their homeland seeking safety in the Soviet Union, France, Great Britain, and the US. As World War II began, the British undertook a great effort to gather up as many of these brilliant physicists as they could, in order to keep them from falling into Nazi hands. The Soviet Union lacked the scientific expertise of Great Britain or the US, however, and in a bid to ensure it was not left out of the race to develop a nuclear weapon, it very quickly got to work infiltrating the nuclear programs of Great Britain and the United States. If the Soviets could not develop their own bomb, they would steal the knowledge to build one from their allies. German refugee theoretical physicist Klaus Fuchs was one of the many scientists scooped up by the British, who fully vetted the young scientist and quickly shipped him to the United States, where the world's greatest concentration of scientific genius was gathered with a single goal: beat the Nazis to a working atomic bomb. Fuchs proved an invaluable addition to the Manhattan Project, and his work sped along the development of a working bomb. Unfortunately for the US and Great Britain, though, Fuchs was also a Soviet agent, recruited by Soviet intelligence and groomed to spy on their behalf. Fuchs was just one of many Soviet spies who had penetrated the Manhattan Project so deeply that Soviet intelligence knew of its existence even before the American FBI did. The stolen work would ensure that just 4 years after the end of World War II, the Soviet Union had its own nuclear weapon. Both the CIA and the KGB are legendary agencies in their own rights, and both sides scored incredible victories against each other throughout the 45 years of the Cold War. Yet, in the end, the KGB is widely acknowledged by intelligence officials around the world as being the superior spy agency, with capabilities so extensive that for almost 10 years the CIA feared recruiting any Soviet agents for fear of being penetrated by moles. While the US enjoyed the security of 2 oceans for the first half of the 20th century, Russian agents were fighting a covert war against their own czars, and eventually the other great powers of Europe. This vast experience helped produce one of the most sophisticated and capable spy agencies that the world has ever known. And despite its eventual end with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, its capabilities have been passed on to the new generation of intelligence agents who now work for the Russian Federal Security Bureau. The cyber war between the CIA and the FSB is already happening, and it's normal people like you and me who stand the biggest chance of getting caught in the middle. But you don't need to have the resources of an army to protect yourself. Dashlane is the one and only tool you need to keep you safe online, and their multi-country VPN lets you browse safely and privately, no matter where you are, across any device. Don't leave yourself vulnerable to digital snooping or malicious hackers. Give Dashlane and its features-packed VPN a try today. We love using Dashlane because not only the
Okay, yeah. So, that's it. We don't have any more slides, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. So, that's the KGB and the CIA during the Cold War. Thanks for listening. And yeah,
Deuces.
deuces, man.
compromised by